So we're just to the east of Yarmouth here. Very, very familiar stretch of water, but extremely unfamiliar view of it. We are obviously looking back towards Southampton and Portsmouth from the Isle of Wight here. So this is the Solent, a piece of water I'm very familiar with, but I'm just not used to seeing it from this side. Very nice calm day. So we're going to walk along and see if we can get to some woodland. Nothing much we can do here. We can't walk along that way, unfortunately. The path is blocked, so we're going to find a footpath and walk in some woodland. Gotta say, I am very impressed with the footpath signs here on the Isle of Wight. We could have wasted time going down this footpath, but this one tells us that it's just for the seawall and return. So we need to use S43, which is further along. So that's really good. So we're heading on down to the coastal path, and hopefully we'll trace that along. I believe there's a fort along here. And maybe today we'll get some footage of the red squirrel. I did actually see a red squirrel this morning while we were driving here on a grass verge as we drove past, but of course I couldn't stop and film it. But I'm happy that I saw one, but I kind of want to show you guys, so we'll keep looking. It's quite strange to be walking in a very dense ordinary woodland and hear the sound of the waves over there. So just through the trees there's a cliff and the shore is just down there. Quite unusual combination of things, really. So even here in the woods there's signs saying which way the coastal path goes, and if you want to go back to the road and catch a bus to Yarmouth or Newport, you can. Interesting warning there, of course, coastal erosion. Little bits of the Isle of Wight keep falling off into the sea, so stay away from the edges of the cliffs. So here we come out of the woods and have an opportunity to get right down onto the coastal path again. And you can see this is the results of coastal erosion. These trees have fallen out of the cliff face as it's worn away and are now lying in the water. But this is an ongoing process, coastal erosion. It's why we have beaches. The cliffs wear away, the gravel and stones become the beach, and as the sea washes away the gravel and stones, more of it comes out of the cliff. Now it's unfortunate that we would like everything to stay the way it is, but in reality nature does not want to do that. So if we stop the cliffs being eroded, we stop the beaches existing. Let's walk a little further along the coastal path. What's up, Eva? You can't swim, so don't try. You don't like the water, come on. So right here, the coastal path goes across a bit of swampy marshland, and we're walking on a built platform that goes through a bed of reeds and back out into the forest at the other side. I guess this must be either just a little creek where it's a low-lying area of land where the tide comes in sometimes, or it could be actually the mouth of a river. Now we're coming into an area of pine trees here. Pine trees mean the possibility of red squirrels, but I'm not going to get my hopes up too high. But I've got the camera on standby in case we're lucky. So this is interesting. Woodpecker's been at this tree eating grubs and things out of the bark. Now let's not get too excited, but up there in the crook of that tree you can see a clump of vegetation right there where the end of my finger is pointing. That is a Squirrel Drey. So that's the nest of a red squirrel, almost certainly. However, I don't know that we're going to actually see the squirrels. Now as we've been walking closer and closer, I've been hearing these birds up in the trees. Now I don't know what they are, the corvids of some sort, rooks, crows, there they go. Talking to each other, doesn't sound like a very interesting conversation. So we've come out onto a bit of heathland really, lots and lots of gorse, and despite the Isle of Wight being really quite chalky, we've got heather here, growing in amongst the gorse. Mostly the flowers of the heather appear to be over. Let me just see if I can find some open flowers, because as with everything else we've always seen, there's always an exception. There's always going to be a little bit that's still going, still flowering later or earlier. There it is. There we are. So that's the heather flowering down there. Let's just do something about that exposure. There. So there we have heather flowers. So this is the perils of coastal paths on the Isle of Wight. The coastal path has disappeared here. We're having to divert through a bit of farmland, which means Eva's on the lead because of cattle grazing. Not that I think she'll give them any trouble, but it's just a situation we need to avoid any confrontation. So I keep on telling you about how important it is to look around and look for the tiny details. And here's a case in point. This little plant down here, I'm going to have to plead ignorance about, because I actually don't know whether this is a species of Speedwell or something else. So let's just get a really close look at it. This is something which I will try to identify when we get back home. But I haven't got my books with me on holiday here, so I'm not really sure that I'm going to identify this before I post the video. So let's get another close look at these little flowers. Aren't they lovely? The more I look at this little plant, the more I think it probably is a Speedwell. It could be that we're seeing the flowers not fully open here, as it's a bit of a damp and cool day. So it could just be that this is a species of Speedwell and I'm having trouble recognising it because of the conditions. Or maybe that's what they're supposed to look like. This is the interesting thing about getting out and looking at stuff in nature, is you will tend to see things that challenge your existing knowledge. Up there on the hill there's the remains of a World War II gun emplacement. It's all fenced off unfortunately, so we can't go and explore that. It does look like pretty much a concrete shed, I think, where they just had the guns that would be able to see out across the Solent and defend the Solent territory. So all fenced off, very stern warnings from the MOD, padlocks on all the gates. I'm sure we could if we wanted to, but I'm not even going to chance it. We just stopped here for a little sit down on a seat for Richard. I don't know who Richard was or is. I imagine this is probably in memory of someone. And what a lovely thing, because we sit down here and we've got a wonderful view of Yarmouth, and right over there in the distance, probably the first thing I recognise that I've visited from the other side. Right over there I can see Hurst Castle just on the horizon. What a lovely, lovely, calm and tranquil view here. So, bless you, Richard. So we're now heading back down a grassy track which is lined with horsetails. We've got common spotted orchid down there. We've got a variety of other plants here. I think Jenny might have just spotted a different orchid. Let's go and have a look and see. There are quite a few species of orchid here in the UK, so let's see what we've got here. I think it is common spotted again. Yes, oh, and that little yellow butterfly there. I'm not very good at butterflies. Try and identify that later when we're back at base. But the orchids we've got here, yes, common spotted. You can tell from the markings on the leaves. So let's keep going and see what else we can find. Up there in the crook of that tree, there's another Squirrel Drey, just up there. Let's see if we can zoom in a bit. But sadly, no sign of activity. They're probably out foraging for nuts and pine kernels. So along the track here, let's have a look at a few of the flowers we've got. Bird's foot trefoil down here. Now the reason this is called bird's foot trefoil will become apparent later in the year. The seed pods, when they develop, they're a bit like pea pods, but they are produced in clusters that look like a bird's foot. So later in the year we'll come back and have a look at those. Maybe not to this particular spot, but we'll find some bird's foot trefoil, and it'll be a lot easier to understand the common name of the thing. And just down here somewhere on one of these leaves I did see a juvenile grasshopper. Let's just see if we can make it come out. It's just here. There it is. Oops, gone. What else have we got? We've got a wild rose there. The roses are just coming out into bloom now. And more of these little orchids. There's a small specimen of an orchid there. So here, more specimens of those rose flowers, rather earlier on in their life cycle, just about to open. And if we look right inside that flower, look, there's a tiny little beetle in there, enjoying the pollen, performing his pollination service for the flower. Okay, now this is interesting. This plant down here with the sort of corrugated leaves is Teasel. Now the Teasel seed heads are much loved by flower arrangers for dried flower arrangements. So here's a rather bedraggled specimen of a Teasel seed head. Teasels are great for wildlife because these seed heads are a source of food for little birds like finches who will eat the seeds, but also they will eat any little insects that go and shelter inside these seed heads. But one of the common names of this plant is shepherd's cup. And look, you can see why. This plant has collected rainwater in the leaf stems, and no, I'm not going to drink it, but that's where it gets the name shepherd's cup. I guess if you had to, that would be probably a better source of clean water than a dirty old stream. I just heard Jenny exclaim that she's found some strawberries. Wow, look at them, all the way along this trail. Wild strawberries. Let's take a really close look and see if we got some that are ripe enough to pick. Here we go, down here, wild strawberries. And not quite ripe. Yeah, nearly. If we look around, we'll find the early ripening exceptions. So I'll camera off for a minute because it's just starting to rain, and I'm going to find myself a wild strawberry to eat. Oh, there's one. That's probably the ripest specimen we're going to find down there. So here we go, that's a wild strawberry, freshly picked, and let's have a taste. Really fragrant, delicious. So we're just walking down this concrete track, and this concrete track is definitely wartime. You can just tell from the construction that this was built in Second World War. And just up through that gate there, I believe, are the gun batteries that we walked past earlier. But they're out of bounds to the public. However, what we've got here is a little pillbox. And this will be a wartime gun emplacement. Let's see if we can actually see it. Oh, we can go inside. How about that? So this is a little military gun emplacement. World War II. Let's have a look inside this gun emplacement. Obviously it has been locked at one time. Let's have a look inside. Let's do some adjustment to the... Yeah, it's a little bit dark and gloomy in here, but actually remarkably good condition for its vintage. Plywood shutters that would have been up over the windows, probably to close it off. And it's been used as a dumping ground for various bits of furniture. I imagine probably some kids had a little den in here or something like that. Remarkably good condition for its age. But no relics or anything like that to see. But there we go. We got to explore inside a World War II pillbox defensive thing. So anyway, let's move back on and see if there's anything else to see. It's quite nice to be able to look inside one of these things, because very often they're completely closed off or boarded up, or actually they've been destroyed over the passage of time. But this one's a remarkably well preserved specimen despite being full of junk. Yes, Eva, it is interesting, isn't it? That's a cow. It's about 100 times bigger than you. And I think that means we can't go in this field. This is where we're meant to cross and follow the path back down. But I don't think we're going to have a fun time with dog and cow. They're both very interested in each other. Oh, Eva. Yeah, I don't think we're going to have a fun time if we try that, so I think we're going to have to chance it on this side of the fence. I don't think he wants to be your friend, Eva. I think he wants to stomp on you. Now, down here, look, it's a slow worm. Not a snake. This is a lizard, but a legless lizard. There we go. Off into the undergrowth. Oh, that's a special sight. Just walking through these tall reeds, it suddenly occurred to me, this is what it's like to be Eva. To not be able to see over the vegetation most of the time. So in the time between our journey out and our journey back, the tide's come completely in. So I'm kind of glad we didn't try walking around the coastal bit. Eva's freaked out by the noise of the waves. So we could have got ourselves stranded on a bit of coast along there somewhere. So I'm kind of glad we didn't do that. Come on, Eva. You really don't want to know what to do with that, do you? Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.